Good evening, welcome. My name is Joanna King, and I am part of the program team here at the American Academy in Berlin. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us for tonight's lecture with the novelist, essayist, and professor of English at Wesleyan University, Maaza Mengiste. It is my great pleasure to welcome so many guests to the Academy this evening, and for all of you bracing this wintry evening, the snow. It's really nice to see you all here. Before introducing tonight's speaker, I'd like to briefly outline the fellowship that makes tonight's lecture possible. Established in 1999 with the generous support of the Holtzbrinck Publishing Group, the American Academy's Holtzbrinck Fellowship was created with the specific goal of fostering German-American dialogue in journalism, literature, and scholarship. We are immensely grateful to the Holtzbrinck family for their continued support, particularly to Stefan von Holtzbrinck, a longstanding trustee and our current vice chairman. His generosity makes so much possible here. And I'd also like to extend an especially warm welcome to Holtzbrinck's head of projects, Christine Lawler, who is with us this evening as well. Over the years, the Holtzbrinck Fellowship has allowed distinguished American scholars, journalists, and writers to join the Academy as fellows, including Jonathan Safran Foer, Nicole Krauss, Sigrid Nunes, Cristina Rivera Garza, who is last year's International Literature Festival and Berlin's curator, Mona El Nagar, and Elizabeth Colbert. Tonight, we have the pleasure of welcoming Priya Basel, a fellow writer and close friend of Maaza's, who will be doing the honors of introducing Maaza this evening. Thank you, Priya, for being here. And now please allow me to briefly introduce our introducer. Priya Basel is an author and curator of the Humboldt Forum project Objects Talk Back. In her book, Be My Guest, she combines memoir, philosophy, food, and politics in a reflection on hospitality in the broadest sense. Her most recent book, Locked In and Out, explores memory, culture, and belonging in Germany. Priya is co-founder and board member of Wir Machen Das, an NGO that works with refugees and migrants for a more inclusive society. She's also a member of the advisory board of the European Center for Constitutional and Human Rights. She's conceptualized and curated projects for various institutions, including the Goethe Institute and International Literature Festival, Berlin. From 2021 to 2023, Priya was International Writer in Residence for Mindscapes, a project of the Wellcome Trust UK devoted to transforming how we understand, talk about, and treat mental health. As part of this, Priya undertook a research journey which spanned 6 continents to learn about different understandings of well-being and practices of healing. In 2024, Priya was writer in residence for Canopy, Wellcome's Climate and Health Project. She's working on a new book now, which draws on her research and travels, which we're excited about. In 2025 and 2026, Priya is a fellow of the Center of Advanced Study, Inherit, Heritage and Transformation at the Käthe Hamburger Kolleg, based at the Humboldt-Universität zu Berlin. Before I hand over the mic to Priya, who will introduce our lovely fellow Maaza Mengiste this evening, I'd like to briefly lay out the format of tonight's event. After Priya's introduction, Maaza will speak for about half an hour, after which Priya will join her on stage for a Q&A. We invite you all to join the conversation and ask questions. And if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. We will come to you with a microphone. And we do ask to make sure that your question is indeed a question. If you're joining us online, you can type your question below the live stream window. And I also would like to mention that guided by the Academy's mission to promote open and thoughtful exchange and to be a place of serious dialogue, we ask that all conversation tonight, as at all of our events, reflect respect for differing perspectives. Now, Priya, I invite you to the lectern and enjoy.
Thank you, Joanna. Good evening, everyone. It's really nice to be here with all of you, and especially to be here with Maaza and to have the chance to introduce her this evening. The dead will shelter the living. They will find us, once we have named them, one by one. So Maaza writes in her novel, The Shadow King. Maaza Mengiste's work unfolds at the intersections of the dead and the living, of literature and photography, of official history, hidden records, and silenced testimony. She has said, "I think a writer's identity is that of someone who has pledged allegiance to seeking and challenging truths. If I'm writing as I should, I am in exile from my own identity. I am challenging my own comfort zones." Maaza Mengiste was born in 1974 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. When she was 4 years old, her family fled the country due to political upheavals. She eventually settled in the United States. In 2011, Maaza's debut novel, Beneath the Lion's Gaze, was published. The story begins in Addis in 1974 and unfolds over the following tumultuous years of the Ethiopian Revolution. The book received international acclaim and was selected by The Guardian as one of the 10 best contemporary African books. Her next novel, The Shadow King, was published in 2019. It also begins in 1974, then circuits back to 1935, before coiling through layers of time, through different places, multiple perspectives, many voices, to tell a story where, as one character says, everything is happening at once. The novel was shortlisted for the 2020 Booker Prize, named Best Book of the Year by the New York Times, NPR, Elle, and Time magazine, and translated into numerous languages. Since then, Maaza has received many awards, including fellowships from the Guggenheim, National Endowment for the Arts, Cullman Center for Scholars and Writers in New York, the DAAD Artist in Residence Program, and now the American Academy. She's a professor of English at Wesleyan University. Her shorter writing has been widely published, including in The New Yorker and the New York Review of Books. She edited the anthology Addis Ababa Noir, published in 2020, which features short stories from Ethiopian writers around the world. Years of experience working with historical materials, piecing together scattered records, has fostered in Maaza an abiding fascination with archives, as well as a commitment to making them more accessible for all. This led her to found the archival project 3541, which, as stated on the website, is an artistic and educational endeavor that uses written, visual, and oral histories to provide an intimate perspective on the global and personal consequences of the 1935 to 41 Italo-Ethiopian War. Project 3541 is a memory project and an act of reclamation that seeks to transcend the static nature of an archive. In an interview with Zeitgeschichte Online, Maaza said, "Photographs are a way for me to step into a moment. Her extraordinary skill lies in devoting meticulous attention to the moment and then leaping imaginatively towards all its possibilities. Thus her writing moves from forensic research to sublime storytelling. I had the privilege to witness this process at close quarters when Maaza took part in the Objects Talk Back project, which, as Joanna mentioned, I curate at the Humboldt Forum. A photograph of a royal Ethiopian cloak from the mid-19th century, kept in the storage of Berlin's Ethnological Museum, set Maaza on a search which exposed the limits of the museum archive and revealed the transformative potential in connecting archives, objects, individuals, and stories, which have been kept separate in the production of colonial knowledge. Through historical documents and images, through gaps and silences, through a narrative woven from fairy tale and fact, Maaza drew close to Henry Noel, an Ethiopian boy who always accompanied a well-known German collector, yet was erased from history. She created a marvelous work called Of Interest to the General Public. It reverberates with many questions, including one raised in The Shadow King, a question which is at the core of all her writing. Who remembers what it means to be more than this world believes of us? of interest to the general public will be published as a book at the end of April this year. There will be a book launch event, and in the spirit of hospitality extended by the American Academy this evening, I would invite you to continue there on the 18th of May, if you'd like to join us. That event will also include a special screening of a multimedia narration that Maaza created especially. Now we will hear from Maaza about her novel in progress, A Brief Portrait of Small Deaths. Like all Maaza's work, it affirms that the living must also shelter the dead. We will find out more of who we are, who we can become, as we name them, one by one. To name is to create a form of refuge, an intimate protection against erasure, neglect, forgetting. Thank you, Maaza.
It's hard to follow. Thank you so much, Priya. Excuse me. Thank you all so much for being here, for making it through the snow. And thank you for those of you that are online. I'm so grateful to be here at the Academy, to be a Holtzbrinck Fellow. I've been here a month, as the rest of my peers have been, and the conversations and extended meals that we have had, I really have to thank them, all my peers here, for their generous exchange of ideas and encouragement. This talk, which I am giving based on my novel, which is still so much in progress, that I will be talking about the research around it. So when it comes time for questions, I will not tell you how it ends, what happens. But this talk rests on the work of so many whom I admire, other writers and scholars who have opened paths into some of my research and my understanding of Germany's relationship with its Black populations over the centuries. Some of the people are here tonight, and some are watching online, and others have written books that have been the guideposts leading me to new ways of thinking as I journey through this world. And I am indebted to them all and to all of you. Oh. Does this work? There we go. The 3rd of June, 1936. A postcard appears on the desk of a certain Otto Baumann Rolfs, former medical illustrator and rising young star in Goebbels' Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. The postcard shows the austere San Stefano Casino and Hotel in Alexandria, Egypt. The image is dominated by the building's stately dimensions and a sandy pathway that leads to an elegant entranceway and portico. If one looks closely, a man is clear in the glass doorway, a silhouette that suggests a life, perhaps one obscured by distance. Nazi investigators will peer at this elusive figure beneath magnifying glass and bright light. They will search for a clue to its hidden meaning. They will look closely at the flat blue emptiness of the sky above and make note of the hot sun that presses rigid shadows on the ground. They will wonder about the pale pink wash that coats the scene, and if that might suggest something to do with the Reds, the communists. The postcard itself is not unusual, and what it says on the back would seem like there is nothing to worry about. In English, it translates to, "Thinking of you, Otto!" exclamation mark. But it is the signature, bold and easily legible, that sets everything in motion. Ernst Dellman. A brief history of Ernst Thälmann. Born on the 16th of April in 1886 in Hamburg, Germany, German Communist Party leader, head of the paramilitary group, the Red Front, and twice presidential candidate during the Weimar Republic, defeated both times by Paul von Hindenburg. Thälmann is pivotal in molding the German Communist Party into the most powerful communist party outside the Soviet Union. Under his leadership, Germany, and particularly Hamburg and Berlin, witnessed bloody confrontations between communists and police, between communists and Hitlerites, between communists and their former comrades, the socialists. With the onset of the Depression and the astonishingly rapid expansion of the Hitlerites, Thälmann makes a fateful decision to focus his party's attacks on the Social Democrats rather than the Nazis. Together with the socialists, the communists might have been able to defeat the Nazis, but that is another story for another time. As soon as Hitler becomes chancellor in January 1933, Ernst Thälmann is arrested and placed in solitary confinement in Berlin Moabit prison, pictured here. By June 1936, Thälmann has been in solitary confinement for 3 years. A postcard signed by Thälmann and addressed to Otto Rolf's office in the film department of Goebbels' ministry building sends alarms through the Third Reich. Investigators work quickly. They confirm that the postcard was in fact sent from Alexandria, Egypt. The date stamp is authentic. It looks like Thälmann's signature. Reports show that when questioned about this, Thälmann asked if Hitler really thought he could manage such a feat of planning and coordination without alerting Goebbels with his vast and perfect surveillance system. In my interpretation, this means go fuck yourselves. Secret police will dust the card for prints. They will find nothing that matches except a fragment that belongs to Herr Alfred Pohl, the postman assigned to the building and heavily vetted by Joseph Goebbels' trusted subordinate, Walter Funk. On the day that Pohl delivers the mail to the ministry building and hands his bag to the officer in the lobby to be screened, he gives his usual greetings, takes the bag that is returned to him, and goes down the hall to the mailroom. He does not think it important to tell anyone until he is questioned later that the postcard had fallen out of his bag on his way to the building and someone had picked it up and handed it back. He cannot remember who did that. He is not sure how it fell out. Records will show that Pohl was asked the same questions again and again. Did he see who it was? Did he remember putting the card in the bag at all? Did he remember where on Wilhelmplatz the person handed it to him? Is he sure it was not Mauerstrasse? Was the person male or female? Did they speak? How did they get his attention? How could he not have looked up and seen a face? Were they wearing a hat? Gloves? Each time, transcripts show, Alfred Pohl gives the same answers. It was on Wilhelmplatz. He did not see who it was. He has no recollection of specifically putting that postcard into his bag. He picked up the mail in stacks from the bin allotted to his delivery area. He cannot remember who handed him the card. He was in a hurry not to be late. He cannot remember if the person wore gloves. It is summer, it is hot, and he thinks he would have noted whether something unusual, such as gloves, were worn. No, he really cannot say whether it was a man or a woman. It was a man. No, it was a woman. He is confused. He is scared. Can he get a glass of water? He knows for sure that he grabbed the card almost without a backwards glance. He was so concerned about a hole in his bag. And then when he turned to look behind him, the person was no longer there. No, he didn't see anything unusual. He was checking his bag as he took the card. He was worried he might have lost other pieces of mail without knowing it. Can he get a glass of water, please? Pohl entered a secret interrogation room in the archives division, which takes up the entire vast basement of the ministry building, the one in use before the extension was completed. This interrogation room is tucked into a corner of the basement, and it is said to be directly beneath Goebbels' second office, the one few people have ever entered or seen. The archives division itself is a special and important part of Goebbels' Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. Here in the basement is where all the material compiled by the German Foreign Service since before the start of World War I is stored. All knowledge of the world, and particularly Germany, is collected and stored here, carefully sectioned and organized, updated every day, every hour, every minute. The physical, psychological, spiritual, economic, political, and social pulse of Germany and all other countries is cataloged by only 7 clerks who work in 24-hour shifts under the direct supervision of the nephew of then War Minister Werner von Blomberg. Some of these archive sections include relations to other countries, banks, peace, army, Jews, colonies, war, art, and so on. Declassified information approved for release by the CIA in 2013 states, the fact that only 8 persons were in charge of the huge system of files is of particular significance. It shows that a comparatively small staff was maintained by the propaganda ministry in contrast to certain other propaganda agencies which were overstaffed, end quote. In the archives division that day, a clerk known to American secret intelligence as Miss Eaton, Miss E, duly records the time the investigator and a typist passed by with a man later identified as Alfred Pohl. It was 2:05 p.m. on June the 3rd of 1936. The transcript of the interrogation ends at 6:35 p.m. that evening. Pohl's last recorded words in response to another question about the exact location of the dropped postcard are, "I have 2 children." Miss E, one of the 6 other clerks who have complete charge of the files in the archives, is on her mandatory 24-hour shift. She notes the time the men depart, 7:14 p.m. She notes she could hear nothing from the room. In her report to her contact in American intelligence, she also states the Pohl could not walk on his own when they left. We have access to the interrogation transcript because Miss E later sent a copy of it to the American intelligence official. She states the original is filed in the archives under internal questions, and a copy is placed in archives of prominent persons under the subhead Ernst Thälmann. Also, another is filed under colonies and communism. Goebbels also requests a copy for himself. By July 1936, someone new is listed in charge of mail for the building, and there is no other record of Pohl anywhere. His name disappears from the telephone directory of the following year. Ernst Thälmann is moved out of Berlin Moabit prison to another prison in Hanover by 1937. He will be executed in Buchenwald in 1944 on Hitler's personal orders, after 11 years in solitary confinement. Pohl will never be found. Under the communism section of the archives, there is a subhead, Hamburg. Miss E sends her American contact copies of documents in those files. One of these pertains to the Hamburg Revolt of October 1923, where communists, hoping to spur a revolution across Germany, then the world, clashed with police. That day saw 100 killed and hundreds more injured. It was, at that time, the bloodiest confrontation in Hamburg's history. Included in the documents sent to American intelligence is a list of names of agitators. One of them is Ernst Thälmann. Another is journalist and activist from Trinidad, George Padmore, editor of the Hamburg-based newspaper, The Negro Worker. Another is Samuel Schwartz. Beneath Samuel Schwartz's name is a city, Alexandria, Egypt. Then it says, one daughter, mixed race, Mischling, Berlin, M. Schwartz. Follow me to the basement of the Archives Division, just past Miss E's desk, where she sits near the stairs and faces hundreds of shelves extending into long, dark rows like teeth in the mouth of a beast. In the K section, under Kolonie den Kinder, children, I am looking for the records of Samuel Schwartz's daughter, whose name begins with M. What I find instead is another name, Magdalena Gaber, called Lenny for short. And then there is Martha Ndumbe. I want to talk about these two women who have helped me get closer to understanding the life of M. Schwartz, daughter of Samuel Schwartz. But first, a brief history, a brief portrait of Lenny Gaber. Born in January 1919 in Berlin-Neukölln, she is the daughter of Joseph Gaber, born in Togo, one of 106 Cameroonians and Togolese who traveled to Germany by ship to participate in the 1896 exhibition of Africans. Held in Berlin from May to October 1896, the colonial exhibition, part of the Berlin Trade Exhibition, was created to promote German colonialism and reinforce racist stereotypes. It was meant to cement a racialized German ideal of what it means to be a human being. The exhibition was in the east of the city on the grounds of Treptow Park. Here is the entrance. The performers were paid between 16 to 20 marks a month and dressed in attire that their German promoters thought looked traditional and African. They were supposed to sing and dance and perform their various crafts in front of recreated African native villages. They were photographed. In the middle is Joseph Gaber, Lenny's father, Magdalena Gaber's father. They were photographed, though some refused, and others refused unless they were dressed in suits or clothing of their choice and paid an extra fee. When the exhibition was done, most of them were young men. Some began their journeys home, but there were others like Joseph Gaber and Samuel Schwartz who chose to stay. Some found apprenticeships and then tried to work in their crafts. Others taught in one of the African language courses provided by German universities to aid colonialists and others in their duties. Many of these young men who stayed struggled with finding employment, facing discrimination in both work and housing, moving from job to job, confronting devastatingly long periods of unemployment, going where a job might be found only to be fired after, seeking housing from landlords willing to host an African, then having to pack up and leave when kicked out. Joseph Gaber, Lenny's father, trained as a tailor and could be counted as one of the lucky ones. He made military jackets for Germany during World War I until he was drafted. Here is a fuzzy, cut-off photograph with his wife, Johanna, and their children, Kitty, Hans, and Deska. Lenny Gaber has not been born yet. As someone from a German colony, there was a measure of protection for Joseph, though he had to contend with discrimination and racism. But when Germany lost its colonies in the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I, the situation for those like Joseph grew even more precarious. They were no longer under German protection. There was no legal imperative to provide them with any of the resources of the state. They could not take advantage of some of the welfare services that were once available to them. They were stateless, living in a kind of limbo where they existed within their families and communities, but invisible in all the other ways that binds an individual to society, to life. Here is an announcement of the establishment of an African Aid Society in 1918, where a group of Africans got together in order to help each other. You'll see a list of names here as well as addresses that span Germany. The association has a mission statement, and part of that says, "The association shall replace a part of our homeland and take away from us the feeling of loneliness in the midst of the white population." Under Joseph Garber's name in the files of the Archives Division, it says stateless. Under his daughter Leni's, born in Germany, it says the same. Here is the family listed in the 1936 Berlin address book. Leni, her brothers Hans and Deska, and her sister Kitty were born in Germany, but as the children of an African from the German colonies, they inherited their father's legal status. To be stateless is to be cut off from the gravity that can keep you on solid ground. It means no step is ever stable. No foundation is solid. From the time of your birth until the foreseeable and frightening future, there is no place where you are safe enough to exert yourself as a full human being. Everything is insecure, especially your parents' income and your right to education and medical care. Even as a child, you must do what you can. And here's a picture of Leni and her brother Hans working as circus performers. As the Nazis take over, it gets worse. You see what is happening to your Jewish friends, the terror and threat and violence ripping through their lives. You see communist friends disappearing. Injured veterans are vanishing from the streets. Parents are writing in newspapers begging for the bodies of their disabled children, begging to know what happened. And you recognize the laws that target them will not make you safe. Your father is arrested several times for not having proper papers. You cannot hide inside this skin of yours. But there is no way to blend in, no way to move through the streets without eyes attaching themselves to you. If you are lucky, no uniform steps forward and says, "What are you?" But you will try to sit in sunlight and feel the warmth, to defy just by your presence. This is in Wannsee, and you can note the Nazi flag in the background. Let me see if I can point to it. Right there. You will try to dare the system to take note. And you will dare to love. There is hardly anything known about Martha Ndumbe except what can be found in police records. She is the daughter of Jacob Ndumbe, who performs in the colonial exhibition, then stays in Germany and marries a woman named Dorothea Grunwald. The family is destitute. Martha's parents eventually divorce. Her mother leaves her to go to Hamburg, and Martha is taken in by another family. There are no photographs of her, no evidence of a community or of friends. Police records tell us one part of her life: petty thief, sex worker, someone with a criminal record. Reports show many arrests even after the Nazis come to power in 1933. They arrest her, then they let her go. They arrest her again, and they let her go. And they arrest her again, and they let her go, again and again and again. Something in this pattern does not make sense to me. This is a space in history I will move into. I want to walk with her through the fragments of her life, not only to make her losses known, but to hold up to light what she might have wanted seen of her, rather than all that was left exposed. Martha marries a German who abuses her and pimps her out. She files charges against him. Hers is a sad existence, violent, a desperate life that ends in a final, devastating arrest and conviction. In 1943, she is sent from one women's prison to another. She is supposed to be released on the 31st of May in 1944, but her name appears on a list of those incarcerated in Ravensbrück on the 9th of June of 1944. The charge, asocial. She is prisoner number 41701. Ravensbrück. She is not the only Black woman in that camp. Does she know this? Do these Black women find each other and offer what meager shelter they can in that camp, in their skin, in that other kind of terrifying light? Martha Ndumbe dies at the age of 42 in Ravensbrück on the 5th of February, 1945. Cause of death is given as tuberculosis. At Maxbierstrasse 24, what was then called Dragonerstrasse, in front of where Martha once lived, is a Stolperstein, a stumbling block honoring her life. More recently, on Nettelbechplatz, if I said it right, in Berlin Mitte, has been renamed Martha Ndumbe Platz. I am trying to hear what it is that I should know about M, daughter of Samuel Schwartz. Samuel is one of those young men who stays in Germany after arriving to work in one of those human zoos. He goes to Hamburg and finds employment in the docks, where he is introduced to communism and works with the man who will become the Communist Party leader in Germany, Ernst Thälmann. This is one of the bars where they meet in Hamburg. The Indian bar at Bernhardstrasse 63 in St. Pauli. It was a favorite of African men. It was run by Hardas Singh, and part of the bar's attraction was said to be 2 Black waitresses who could serve a mean schnapps. Hamburg is where George Padmore works and settles to publish his revolutionary newspaper, The Negro Worker. The city is full of sailors from West Africa, San Francisco, Antwerp, New York, Liberia, South Africa, East Africa, Egypt, Norway, what was then called Siam, India, Italy, Moscow, Brazil, the UK, and so on. The bawdy, seamy bars on the Reeperbahn are welcoming spaces for the global brotherhood to gather. This is where they are served and serviced by women who form their own networks of political subversion and comradeship. What I imagine, that Samuel works in the docks, his wife works in the fisheries. Both of them return home to Altona, smelling of sweat and fish and the sharp tang of the sea. M, whom I have called Milli, watches her parents break themselves beneath hard labor and recognizes the many ways a body can be bent into submission then defeat. She refuses that fate. She wants to move in the way she decides. She knows of her father's African compatriots, those who walked out of degrading human zoos and onto stages and into spotlight. People like Louis Brody, so well known for his many films, she envisions him constantly wrapped in applause and cheers. Here he is in Fritz Lang's Metropolis. She knows of others who dance and perform and move with a freedom she imagines can also be hers. Here is a scene I will play from Einbrecher, featuring Sidney Bechet and several of Berlin's Black population. God, I hope it works. Milli looks to Berlin, and the day she leaves, not long before he is arrested, and Stellman gives her words of advice. These are words that he once said to someone else, another woman who will use every part of herself to try to keep her spirit free. He says, "You will not be able to hide inside that skin of yours. They will ask you to expose yourself in ways you do not expect. They will insist. Remember that all the labor a body does must be honored and respected. There is no shame in the work one must do to survive. Do not forget that we are all born with an ancient memory of justice, and it is right to rebel in the face of abuse. It is right to demand fairness, and the body can be both a thing of beauty and a weapon." And Stellman and Milli M. will keep in touch until all communication is cut off for him after the arrival of the postcard supposedly signed by him and addressed to Otto Baumann Rolfs. That postcard will collapse the distance between Milli in Schöneberg, Stellman in his cell, and Otto Rolfs in the film department. See Otto Rolfs. Born in 1905 in Brandenburg, son of a retired policeman, an old acquaintance of Milli's, someone fascinated and repulsed by the vision she makes in front of him, dancing on stage, posing for his drawings, sliding next to him in his bed. Otto will find himself called to Goebbels' office to answer questions about Thälmann and his acquaintances. In Miss E's notes to American intelligence, there is one reference to an Otto B. Rolfs film division, and then a cryptic, incomplete sentence, Schwarz, M. Goebbels inquiring. Milli Schwartz is inspired by an encounter I had at an exhibition of German artists of the Neue Sachlichkeit, the New Objectivity movement. This was nearly 14 years ago, and when I tried to pick apart my memory of that day to remember which piece of art transfixed me until I felt paralyzed, I think it would be Christian Schad's Augusta, the Pigeon-Chested Man, and Rasha, the Dove. This painting, made in 1929, features two people who lived and worked in Wedding, Berlin. Rasha is said to come from Madagascar. She is a circus performer who earns her money by performing tricks with a boa constrictor around her neck. She is married to a white German man who also is a circus performer. They have a son, and they raise hens. She would sometimes bring fresh eggs for Christian Schad when sitting for this painting for him. And then there is Augusta, married with 2 children, who complains because his female fans, of which he has many, tend to get too aggressive in their pursuits of him. He loves his wife, he tells Schad. He is a family man. Schad mentions nothing more about them in his journals. He does not record their last names, and there is no other information about Russia and Augusta's fates as the Nazis come to power. Seeing this painting, however, reconfigured this moment in German history in my mind. It became something both familiar and startlingly new. I went through the exhibition once more and then started looking at all of the work I could find of German expressionists, and other people, once invisible to me, stepped forward to be recognized. Otto Dix, Metropolis. Maybe you can see the man in the background. Right there. Ernst Ludwig Kirchner's Portrait of a Woman. And this is Ernst Neuschel's The Black Mother. Who were these people who were held in the gazes of these artists, of these audiences? This is what I know from the accounts of Black Germans who lived in Germany during the 20s and 30s, those who left us their stories in order to remove themselves from the registries of the discarded and walk into the warm shelter of the treasured. Though the primary focus of the Nazis' racist racial policies were Jews, the flexibility of their racism and their racist laws could be and were applied also to Black Germans and the Black population in the country. Those young Africans who participated in human zoos then settled in Germany very often remained stateless, their requests for citizenship denied. Those few who did manage to somehow get German citizenship were stripped of it by the time the Nazis came to power in 1933. By 1933, too, as educational systems, workplaces, and society in general were being Nazified, mixed-race children and Blacks in Germany were being kicked out of schools and fired from their jobs. Most found some respite in clubs, bars, and in films where they played parts that reinforced racist stereotypes and tropes. These are members of the German Africa show, which was sponsored by the Nazis. This was taken around 1937. In the back, way back, wearing a flat hat, is Lenny Garber's brother, Deska. This is how they were dressed once they were actually in the show. And this is again around 1937. These are some of the female performers. And at the very bottom, you'll see Kitty Garber and Lenny. And there were others, when they were no longer useful, were sent to camps where they later died. This is the Garber family who survived. And this is Majub bin Ahmad Muhammad, who was killed. Time has collapsed, and Alfred Pohl is asking for water in the tiny room tucked beneath Goebbels' secret office. And I am walking past Miss E's desk in a space none of them, least of all Goebbels, ever intended for me to be. I see her. I see Miss E. She is shaking. She is shaken. She is typing her notes, glancing at me, then glancing down so that I disappear from her sight, so I cannot be named and called out by her. I keep walking, not a subject, but the writer, not afraid, but mournful and curious and stubborn, and my heart stretches thin and causes me pain. I step into that interrogation room, and I smell rust and metal and something else stale and frightening. I look at Alfred Pohl, and he returns my gaze, and he can hear me without words. I see you, I say. You are known to me, I tell him, and you will disappear no more from the face of this earth. I step towards those files that contain the lives of others like me, immigrant and African, and I am not ashamed of my dark skin, but so grateful, so proud. I am rifling through documents, speaking names aloud, voice and sound echoing in this hollow chamber of horror and stunted history, following a path so many others have laid down so that I might walk beside them and work with them to reclaim our kin from the dungeons and basements and cells and graves from which they were meant to be forgotten. Small deaths, all. As if a person can be so thoroughly known that it takes only a single word to erase a lifetime, to negate worth, to kill one's ambitions and dreams. A single word: stateless, African, Jew, colonial, subject, foreigner, Arab, performer, migrant, criminal, Asian, communist, disabled, asocial, misfit, enemy, amoral, beggar, pervert, Roma, Sinti, prisoner. There are other words, of course, but I want to pause here and try to explain how these stories and images move across my imagination, because there is something that trembles beneath the words when I sit down to write. And the act of writing is also an act of listening, of opening oneself to the tremors that reverberate across time and space and rise with the solidity of flesh and blood to form what we have found no other name for except story and poetry. What if is usually where I begin. This means I often have to put aside readings and details and humble myself before the gaps that history always leaves, that memory often tries to hide behind, in order to catch that sliver of a voice or a note that will open a door to the possibilities of a life, of many lives that sweep past and also crash headlong into each other. I am trying to catch it all while staying focused on the urgent and necessary realities of being human in inhuman times. This means I cannot push aside Alfred Pohl's requests for water or his announcement that he has 2 children, because I hear in that declaration something else. He is saying, I am loved, and beyond this physical body are others, and they will carry me forward when I am gone. I cannot forget the homes being emptied of their Jewish inhabitants, the catastrophic brutalities that descend on their lives, the stink of fish and sweat that Milli smells on her parents. I will not leave that behind either. There is Ernst Thälmann in his prison cell. What happens to a mind after 2 years of solitary confinement, after 5 years, after 11? All of it pulses through the work I am doing. The blood, the kinships, the degradations, the animal scent of hate and fear, the deep sorrow that can harden to fury and lead to unimaginable cruelties if it is not held in a tender hand. And the love, the astonishing acts of giving and sharing and communing. All of it demands careful steps onto a landscape that often keeps me destabilized. Writing a novel is not simply the excavation of facts. It is an unwavering refusal to judge quickly. It is an insistence on not turning away, no matter how uncomfortable it gets. It is an assertion that we are, each of us, more than our bodies, that we are more complex and more confounding than the politics attached to our lives. It is the belief that we can become beloved to those who never knew us but came to learn our names. Writing through history's archives, writing out of them and against them, is to understand that as much as we try to focus and study and isolate and research, what defines us cannot be contained in compact sections of knowledge and neatly organized into facts. What I mean is, no name ever travels alone. Do we not stand, each of us, in the echoes of those who beckoned us forth from the folds of their own history, transforming their quiet resolve to live into something akin to love? The work that I do, what I have done across my books, is based on the steadfast belief that all of us carry a history that is not history, that we move through our days in constant communication with a past that breathes into our future. If we look across those rows of documents lined up like teeth, do we not hear those other names, those other lives, trespassing boundaries, breaching classifications, stepping out of shadows and into gentle light to say, look, look, look at me? What document, what archive can contain all of this? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maaza, for inviting us into your process. I'd like to ask you something about where you arrived towards the end when you talked about writing as an act of listening. And it strikes me that this form of listening you describe as actually a very multisensory act, that you listen to images, to records, to police records, in a way that evokes taste, smell, that evokes touch, consciousness. And these records become multidimensional through the way that you write about them. And we as readers then are able to inhabit them. And I'm curious about, in particular, the relationship to images and the skill of listening to them. How did this develop and how has it become so central to your writing practice?
Oh, thank you for that, Priya. You know, I have, when I think about how my attention to images developed, I think about some of my earliest memories in Ethiopia, which were of being in my grandparents' sitting room, and there were 3 huge, maybe 4 black and white images, but I was maybe 3 years old at the time, maybe 4 years old, looking at a photograph of myself, a studio photograph. I was maybe 6 months old, staring at it, trying to understand in my young mind how I can be the one sitting on the floor, but how I can also be the one in the picture. And where does time go, and who is it? So this idea of a doubling of collapsed time is something I have always associated with images, but also to look closely, because does this image move? If I move, will it move? These are questions I would ask. But in that moment too, when I think back to that memory, there was a revolution unfolding outside of our window. Soldiers were shooting at other revolutionaries. And that memory weaves through my introduction of photographs. And so for me, an image has never been static. It really has depended on what is happening in that time, who is looking, how can I look with their eye and my own and create some kind of a prismatic awareness of that moment. And I think I'm articulating it in a way I could not when I was 4, obviously, but that seed was there, and I think that's what led me to think about the uses of photography, both what's revealed but also what's hidden, and how it takes someone stepping close and understanding that time can collapse in the space in between.
Yeah, what's also so special in what you do is that you're able to take records that were used to demean and to look at them and use them in a way that can redeem and restore. And yeah, that's something that you mentioned also, that you are following a path so many others have laid down. And you also recognize that some of them are here, and they have been doing this work in different ways. I wanted to recognize you in this lineage of writers and artists who have been working with historical material to tell stories, and also the scholars who have theorized these approaches. I couldn't help but think of Saidiya Hartman and critical fabulation, and what she describes as a method to displace the received or the authorized version when working with records. And there's Donna Haraway with speculative fabulation, which she describes as a mode of attention, a theory of history, a practice of worlding. All this is happening in your work. And what is so unique in what you do is that you transcend space and time to unite, to bring together lives that have not been seen in proximity. And there's another scholar who has a term for this, which also came to me when I look at your work and when I heard you tonight. A Japanese scholar, Lisa Yonayama, and she calls it co-conjuring, which has this kind of magical aspect to it, which I love. And she describes it as an aesthetic strategy that brings together the pained histories, grief, and grievances from dissimilar contexts to illuminate their connections, if even in transience. And why is it important for you to do this? Why do you want to unite these seemingly separate stories?
Thank you for that question, Priya. It's because the stories have never been separate. I think that history compartmentalizes. If you have an archives, you have to figure out where something goes. But our lives have never been like that. And in everything that I have researched or written regarding Africans and their connections maybe with Europe and other continents, you see these lives that are constantly entwined in one way or another. But it depends on who's writing the story, who's writing the history, whether those connections are ever fully acknowledged. I don't make up the connections, they exist. And I think the joy of my work, what I love so much about it, is that what I find ends up being both strikingly new, but also deeply familiar. And when I'm looking at the communities of Africans and other communities across Berlin in the 20s and 30s and 40s, what I find again and again are the alliances and communities that trespass boundaries that the state and the regime is trying to make. Again and again, people break those. And I find that, especially in today's climate, especially heartening.
Yeah, no, the contemporary resonances of the historical unfoldings you were sharing with us were so strong. I have more questions, but I'm also really conscious that we have a room full of people with a lot of experience and expertise and who connect your work in all kinds of different ways. And I would love to open up the chance for others to ask and reflect. Well, ask, actually, Joanna reminded us, we should have very precise questions. And so if you would like to raise your hands, Joanna will come around with the mic. I think we have one right at the back there already. Joanna, thank you.
First and foremost, your oratory skills are remarkable. Oh my Lord. So my first question is, there are two questions, I'll keep them short. It seems as though this postcard kickstarted everything. Did it, and why? And if not, what did? Because you seem to be very historical, and in that sense, I'm thinking of microhistory and how, you just come across something in the archive and somehow that unravels like a ball of yarn. And number two, and pardon me if I did not understand, what was it about the postcard that was so intriguing in the Ministry of Propaganda that suddenly made somebody disappear? I didn't get that. So if you could maybe go a little bit more into detail. Thank you.
And I will say that I'm not going to give away secrets of the book. But the postcard for me became very interesting because I'm looking at Hamburg and tracing as many of the African Black populations, communities there that live. So this led me here. What triggered everything was, how would somebody who is in solitary confinement sign a card that came from Egypt?
Yeah. We have a hand up here, and am I seeing one? No, just here then. Thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic, Martha. Thank you. The question is, you as someone who did not grow up in Germany nor lived here, when did you first become aware of the presence of Black people in Berlin or in Germany at large?
Yeah, thank you, Volker, for that. When my cousins, when we left Ethiopia to get out of the revolution and we lived in Nairobi, my cousins went to German school. And so they grew up speaking fluent German and always traveling here. So my introduction to Germany was, in a sense, through my cousins who were always coming here. Eventually they settled here. But I didn't understand the historical presence of Black people here until, talking to them, of course. But when I started looking at these paintings, more than a decade ago, was when it just hit me that, oh, wow, it's not just a new phenomenon. And of course, there are people here who know this very well. For me to have recognized it at that time, it set off something that I didn't understand at that time would lead to a novel. I thought it was just a passing fascination. I've seen it. I know Black people have been here, but that's not my story. I was writing about Ethiopia, but these images kept coming back again and again. And at some point I realized, imagination, if we do it well, has no boundaries and no borders. And what I did understand from this is what it means to be Black and African and an immigrant in a place where you cannot hide because of the color of your skin. as things are getting more and more racist. And this is why this novel, I think, has just gripped me. Yeah, thank you for that.
I'm going to cheat. I'm going to ask you a question, but it's actually I'm giving you a little bit of info. Did you know that on Saturday, there's going to be a walk at Treptower Park, Zurückerzählt mit Vincent Bababu Tilabo. It's part of the Black History Month program of events that's happening. So there's going to be, Vincent has been organizing these tours of Treptower Park and talking about, and I think everybody here should.
Absolutely.
But no, my question was, did you know that was...
But also to say, Sharon, and thank you, is that in Treptower Park, you saw the photographs of Joseph Gaba and the others. I took some of these photos with my camera. There is a museum there. I believe those pictures are still up by a group called Decolonial, but it traces the history of these Cameroonian and Togolese and other Africans from 1896 to as close to present day as possible. That exhibition is spectacular. So please, please, please go see it if you can. Thank you for that. I'll follow you there on Saturday.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. My question sort of links exactly to what was just mentioned, but it is an actual question. Thank you so much. I think one of the really interesting things that happens for those of us working on Black histories in Germany is exactly the question of what kinds of things and places can become archives or end up being archives. And I think what I would be really interested to hear is whether in the starting process of your research, you've come across any untraditional places that have helped you in tracing these stories, whether there's anything you want to share on those. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and I can talk about this book is still moving. I'm still moving through it, but particularly for my last book, The Shadow King, the best thing became for me to move out of the archives fully and to just start going to flea markets and going to every Mussolini table I could find, to speak to the vendors, to start going through their materials. And that's really when the book came alive. So there are these places, and I, like Priya said, I really respond to photographs. I couldn't put everything up here, but I have albums, I have some photographs of this period that has been, for me, completely startling, and they come from flea markets. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, and thank you so much. Your comments, the particular one about how you look at an image and how you look at it from how you see the perspective of the person taking it, as well as your own, that really, it stuck with me because it makes me realize, and I would love for you to comment on how this is in your process, that a lot of times what's preserved is preserved from the very people who want to crush or denigrate or hide Black culture or whatever it may be. And so can you comment on how that is a part of how you widen your lens?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. In particular, you're referencing those images that have been stereotypical and they've been degrading, those colonial era images that we have all seen, where you have these colonizers, Europeans with their cameras, they go to make an image of an African or someone from Asia, and we'll see that image. And my contention with those photographs is that those photographs are never about the African in the picture. Those images are self-portraits of the photographer, because we recognize the photographer through the subject. And all of those colonial era images do nothing but uphold a kind of whiteness that means nothing unless it's set next to that subject. And for me, all of them, they're all self-portraits. Yeah, thank you.
If I may follow up a part B. Because so the astrophysicist who first calculated from mathematics using Newtonian physics and as a contemporary was a Jamaican, a Black Jamaican. And there's an oil painting of him in this regal royal clothing.
Mhm.
And so his name is Francis Williams. And the only reason, so he was also a painter, a polymath. The only reason it survives today is because a contemporary who absolutely hated him said, this guy was such a loser in the parlance of that day. And it went back to the Academy of Sciences in London. And footnotes like David Hume also said he was just dressing up like a monkey. And it just reminds me so much of your process, because it's because of these teeny tiny nuggets of people who didn't like him that he could rise in the archives. And it's work like yours that patches this stuff together and allows us to have that fuller picture. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Yeah, we have some at the back there.
Hi, thank you. I was really excited by this talk because most of the representations of Blackness and discourses around Blackness that I've encountered in Germany in the interwar period in the Weimar Republic have usually been framed in terms of Americanization of pop culture. And so, as obvious as it feels, I've never seen somebody go into so much depth about representations and discourses of Blackness in Germany as coming from the legacy of colonialism and coming from the legacy of these ethnographic human zoos. And I was wondering, encountered in some of the records that you found, people, these sort of stateless African Germans reacting to this Americanization of the discourse at the time. If they're leaning into that, it sounded like they were obligated to a certain extent to play into this in order to find roles to survive and to find jobs in entertainment industry, or if all of these sort of discourses about representation were just luxuries they didn't have because they needed to survive from day to day, and sort of how these two dialogues come together.
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't know if I'm understanding correctly, but I will say that the worry was less about the Americanization of it, if I understood that. But people were trying to survive. Nazis were making propaganda films. The Nazis wanted some of their colonies, former German colonies, back. They started making these films and hiring some of these people who were desperate for work and tried to survive this way. Between eating and being sent to a camp or being forced into labor or going into a film, I think they were making the choices that they had to. Yeah.
There was another hand towards the back, but maybe the question is. Okay, we have one there and one right at the back.
Okay, and then maybe we
collect both of them now, and then
Yeah, we'll collect these two, and that will maybe be the last.
Thank you so much for that incredibly inspiring and rather emotional talk. I have sort of a nuts and bolts question, which is, I noticed that quite a few of the people in the photographs that you showed have German last names, but they're obviously African. So I'm wondering, why is that? Is that a result of intermarriage? Was it in the colonies? Was it in Germany? Or was it the result of slavery, where were Germans owning Africans and giving them their names? What's all that about?
The men that you see here, like Joseph Garber, the Togolese name, I believe, was Gaba, but then was adapted a bit. And so you'll see that happening sometimes. But then, for example, there were Africans with I don't know where it came from, but I do have friends with this name from Benin, Lawson. And that was also there. So I'm not sure exactly the reason for that. But you ask a really interesting. I think there's something interesting here. You'll see that the children that you've been able to see here, the mixed race children that we've been able, not me, there are people who are doing this work. I'm just borrowing their work. But people who have been able to track down the mixed race children because they have the last names of the father, Lenny Garber, and so on. It made them stateless, but they have these names. There were times when if the German mother did not marry this African man, because if a German white woman married an African man who is stateless, she would become stateless too. And then so would their children. So some of the ways that people got around this until 33 is if they did not marry, then the woman remains a German citizen. The African man will have to keep trying to be a citizen, but the children that are born will have the mother's citizenship. But that also means that they will have the mother's last name, which also means for those of us looking back, trying to trace people, that those people with German last names that are mixed race are now, in essence, lost to history. We don't know that they're mixed race. So we don't know what happened. For some, the trail just goes cold because of that. Yeah.
So perhaps our last question for the evening.
I have a bit an evil question, and I'm not sure whether I can put it into words. I understood that I was very fascinated by what you were saying about all the documentary aspect and about the fates of the people, and that you have to point out at the little fates and the about this approach to history through little fates. But then, on the other hand, I understand it's supposed to be a novel, which goes far beyond documentary aspects, even deeper aspects of documentary, which say what kind of history one has to look at. So my question is, beyond all these very important and fascinating aspects of documentary and history, what would you think is the goal of your novel?
I knew, sir, I'm not going to give my novel. But this is where the novelist says to an audience member, please trust me. I know what I'm doing. But it all comes together.